What is up? Welcome to the biggest YouTube fitness Q&A in history. Probably. So, there have been 105 questions. The way most YouTube fitnessers do this is they get a bunch of questions and they answer like 5 or 3 or maybe like 10 at most. But I am not like most YouTube fitness influencers. I'm going to answer every single damn question. If you do squats, deadlifts, and lunges twice per week for 4 sets each, is the more isolation type of stuff like leg extensions, leg curls, calves, and adductor, abductor machine necessary? I would say they can help, and doing a few sets of abduction, adduction, calves, etc. can be a good idea for a few reasons. First, my nose itches. I'm just going to itch it. Had to be done. So, part of the hamstring muscle doesn't cross the hip. It only crosses the knee joint. So you really need to train knee flexion in order to actually train this part of the muscle. So I think some kind of curling motion is really, really important and really, really useful. Leg extensions, not as important, but it does train the rectus femoris. So this muscle that actually crosses the hip as well. Plus, while squats do train the calves, as do deadlifts a little bit, and as do lunges, you want some kind of specific work to get maximal development if that's something you're interested in. Number 3, I have a meniscus issue which prevents me from squatting. What can I do? By the way, meniscus issue is actually pretty damn hard to say. That took me a few tries. Just full disclosure. Honestly, this is sort of a tough situation. Something like a Bulgarian split squat or a lunge, it's easier on the lower back, but it can be harder on the knees because it requires more stability. I would go with maybe light sets of leg extensions, see how you feel. The leg extension, especially if you go heavy, can produce a lot of force on the patellar tendon and inside the knee joint. But if you go really light, that might be a good option. This is where blood flow restriction training is actually a good option because you don't have to go as heavy and you can get a good stimulus on the muscle. Purpose of partials, won't it just generate fatigue? Typically speaking, heavy partials will generate more fatigue than a full range of motion for less muscle growth, so I don't advocate partials most of the time. But for some people, they might be good. If you're a powerlifter and you're struggling with a certain part of the range of motion, I think spending more time in that part of the range of motion, potentially with a heavier weight, can be a good option. So it just depends on your goals. I think, this sort of like constant tension style of training is a little bit silly, to be honest. But if it works for you, it's fine. Experiment with your training and see what is going to be optimal to get you the best results. So on lat pull down, carry over to pull-ups. So if you get much stronger at pull downs, you'll probably get stronger at pull-ups. It's essentially the same movement. Either pulling something down or pulling yourself up. It's the same muscles. Pull-ups are a little bit more challenging, and I found that pull-ups carry over to pull downs more than vice versa. But either way, if you put a lot of strength into either movement, it's going to carry over to the other one because they're almost identical. Next one, how would you schedule your bulking and cutting process, and how would you advocate beginners to go about this process? I did a full video. I will link it in a card above, but basically I tried to keep people bulking as long as possible. So you want to bulk long, bulk slow, and when you cut relatively faster. This is simply because muscle takes longer to grow than fat takes to lose. You can lose fat pretty damn quickly, but muscle, it always takes time. So you want to get into a small caloric surplus, ride that out for a long time, and then when you get a little bit too fluffy, do a short mini cut. Then go back to bulking. I would say at least 80% of your time should be bulking and doing it slowly. What most people do, they bulk too quickly, they lose their abs or they just get straight up fat, they get unhappy, and then they cut. But their cut is half-assed. So they're bulking quickly, and then they cut slowly because they cut like a pussy, and this is the opposite of what you actually want. Do you do any kind of strongman exercises like farmer's walks or sled pulls? I don't have access to a sled, so no, but I do occasionally do farmer's walks. They're kind of boring, so I don't really show them. Like, who wants to just watch someone walk with a couple dumbbells? No one. I think strongman is great. I think it's sort of a niche sport that is really growing pretty quickly, and I think these movements are really good for muscle growth, but also functional fitness and increasing your strength as it applies to the real world. All right, the next one, does high-frequency squatting take the place of cardio, GPP, that kind of stuff? Yeah, I would say absolutely. If you're squatting 3 to 6 times per week, you're not going to be running marathons as well. It's two different directions. It's completely counterproductive. You can maybe keep in a little bit, but if you're running a small of cycle where you're squatting 4 times per week for high volume, close to failure, etc., you don't want to be doing anything else. When you're on your day off, you want to just sleep. Eat and sleep, that's about all. So I would say it depends on your goals. If you're an MMA fighter or a CrossFitter, you have to keep some conditioning in, and I don't think squatting really fully conditions you the same way that actually high-intensity cardio or other traditional cardio does, but you need to prioritize certain goals. If your goal is to squat more, yeah, you can't be doing a ton of cardio, especially if you're natural, because you need to reap the specific adaptations of squatting. All right, the next question, gaintaining or maintaining for a skinny ectomorph in the first 2 years of training, or just go into a 500 calorie surplus and ride that out. I would say go by feel. If you're really underweight and you've always been underweight your whole life, like you've never been above 15% body fat, and you're lean and you're skinny and you're underweight and you want to gain muscle, you need to fucking eat, okay? Don't be worried about like, am I in a 200 or 300 calorie surplus? I know this sort of goes against what I said before, but if you've always been lean, it's gonna be no trouble to cut that fat off. Okay, so you might as well shoot for like 10 kilos of weight gain your first year. Will all of that be muscle? Hell no. But it doesn't matter because you can lose the fat really quickly. So I would say err on the side of a little bit more calories, especially if you're hungry. If you're squatting, if you're bench pressing, if you're doing rows, if you're doing these big movements and you're hungry, eat. Okay, don't worry too much about the calories. Again, you can always lose that fat later. Not a big deal. All right, the next question, is there any difference between a super curl bar and an easy curl bar? I admit I had to look up what a super curl bar was. I'll put a picture on the screen. Honestly, I guess you could do a neutral grip and it's a little bit less subtle of a rotation that you get. But honestly, I think they look pretty similar and I wouldn't think that there would be a big difference. Next one. Can I make progress if I am training fasted in the morning? Yes, you can still make progress, but I like to have people get in at least some kind of protein and probably some kind of carbohydrate before they train. Honestly, pre-workout carbs are going to be very individual. Some people find that it gives them way more energy. Some people find almost no effect. Some people find that carbs actually sort of make them sleepy and lethargic. So I would say go by feel, experiment with some pre-workout carbs. You can always change your schedule, experiment with different times per day. I would say the majority of people are going to benefit from working out later in the day. So afternoon or evening, your performance is generally going to be better. I did a full video on this. I will link it in a card above as well. But it's very individual and you need to experiment and see what works for you. I'm just some guy on the internet who knows some stuff. I don't necessarily know you unless you're a long-term client. The next question, have you coached anyone for powerlifting? Do you train people off-season non-competitively, or do you also go through the peaking process and help them get ready for competitions? In a word, no. I've coached a couple of powerlifters or people with powerlifting goals who are even stronger than I am, but I am not a powerlifting coach. I'm going to do a full video on this. Obviously, I can't link it because it doesn't exist yet. But I am not a powerlifting coach by any means, and there are far more qualified people than me. The next question is pretty long, so I'll put it on the screen. You can read alongside, but it says basically the 0.7 to 1 gram per pound rule. Does it apply to lean body mass or just normal body mass? I would say it applies to normal body mass, but if you are a very high body fat percentage, you might want to bring down the number slightly, like if you're 50 or 60% body fat or something like that. And I have worked with people who are that high in body fat percentage. You might want to lower your protein a little bit. I would say for most people, I recommend 0.7 to 0.8. There's no need to go to 1 gram per pound. And so for most people, that's going to be like 150 to 200-ish at the max. Next question, a simple one. What do you think of sumo deadlifts? I like sumo deadlifts. I think they are legit. I think it's crazy when people are like, sumo is cheating. No, okay? It might look less impressive, it might have less range of motion, but it is still a legitimate lift with legitimate benefits. And if you look at a lot of conventional pullers, they do sumo as well. So I think they have sort of similar benefits. They can sort of coexist side by side and they can actually benefit each other. So if you pull conventional, you should probably also pull sumo and vice versa. If you are a sumo puller, you can also benefit from conventional. A lot of it depends on how your hips are set up. Some people, they find that a very wide sumo stance grinds their hips into oblivion. So really go by feel, but keep in mind there are some unique benefits, and I do think it is a good movement. Next question, how do you deal with recovering from an AC joint injury? I don't know, because I've never had that injury, and I've never had a client have that injury either. So I would say generally avoid what hurts and do as much as you can that doesn't hurt. So if incline bench press always messes up your AC joint, stop doing that movement. Or modify it to where you can do it. Stay below the threshold of injury. So if 100 kilos on the incline bench press causes you issues, but 80 kilos seems fine, maybe just stick to 80 kilos. Do more reps, more sets, more control, maybe a slower tempo, paused reps, that kind of thing. Stop irritating the area, and you really do need to listen to your body because it's going to tell you what is irritating that area. So listen to your body and you should be fine. How do you structure a lifting program with scoliosis in your neck and lower back? My family has a history of scoliosis. I luckily don't have it, but yeah, I would say be careful with spinal loading exercises, obviously, squat, bench, deadlift, rows, etc. And again, go by feel. Generally speaking, your body is going to tell you when it's not happy with what you're doing. And scoliosis is probably no exception. All right, this next question is pretty long and kind of interesting. Does weight and rep progression even matter if you're going to failure each set, even if you adopt this hippie mindset where you stop counting reps and seek to go to failure with immaculate form every set while disregarding the PR mindset? Would you still build the same amount of muscle and strength as you would with progressively overload focused training? So progressively overloading, that doesn't mean chasing PRs. They're different, and I would say chasing PRs can often get you into trouble. It can lead to sloppy form, it can lead to stagnation, it can lead to going too close to failure too often. And failure is good, but if you're doing squats to failure consistently, that is a really good way to go absolutely nowhere. So I would say no. Your body doesn't necessarily know if you are writing something down in a training log. Your mind definitely does, and if your mind is the limiting factor and your motivation is the limiting factor, I would say a training log and keeping in a progressively overloading mindset can actually help a lot. But it's not 100% needed, and some people get great results not writing anything down at all, not tracking anything, just working their asses off. So keep in mind, your body knows work. It doesn't know writing. Question, I heard somewhere that hamstring curls doesn't translate to deadlift strength because they are two different movements, and that's true. The hamstring crosses your knee, and it also crosses your hip, and it's responsible for hip extension, which is what happens when you are deadlifting. Knee flexion doesn't happen when you're deadlifting. In fact, knee extension is what happens. So that function of the hamstrings not only is not being trained, it would actually be counterproductive to curl the knee, to flex the knee. However, I would say it's probably a good idea still to build up that area. Part of the hamstring only crosses the knee, so I think to get maximal development in that area, training that area is a good idea with curling movements. However, I wouldn't expect it to really blow up your deadlift. It's more of just a stabilizer and keeping a well-rounded physique and keeping functionally strong. So yes, they are right. That shouldn't really have a big impact. And if someone wanted to blow up their deadlift, RDL is great, deadlifts great, squats great, back extensions all awesome, but curls would not be my go-to at all. Would you recommend going for a mini cut between bulking cycles? Yes, and how would I structure it? I would say bulk for as long as you can, like I said before, and then cut for as short as possible. So you might do like a 10 or 12 week bulk, going from a low body fat percentage, relatively low, maybe 10 or 12%, up to 16, 18%. Stretch that out as long as you can. It might even be 16 weeks. It could be half a freaking year. And then you cut down, losing roughly maybe 1% of your body weight every week. And you do in this pattern. So bulk up, cut down, bulk up, cut down, and just progress from there. I think that's the best way to do it. And it's a good strategy. So progress from maybe 12% up to 18%, cut back down, 12 to 18, and go from there. Have you ever had to deal with the pain and posture problems associated with muscle imbalances? Yeah, absolutely. I was a runner for about 10 years before I really even weightlifted seriously. And when you run on the roads mostly, and it is sloped, it is cambered. So when you're running, and you always run on one side, so you don't get just streamlined by a car, blindsided, you are running on an uneven surface all the time. So your left leg is always a little bit longer than the right one because it adapts to this difference. Furthermore, when you're running on a track in a competition, or even not a competition usually, you are always running in the same direction. Everyone runs counterclockwise. And so because of that, I do have some muscle imbalances, some leg length imbalances, maybe functional leg length imbalances, maybe actual leg length imbalances, I don't even know. But definitely I am not 100% even, and that translates to my shoulders as well. You can maybe sometimes see when I am pressing, or even when I am bench pressing, one side might lock out a little bit before the other one because of these muscular imbalances. Do they cause pain? Not really. Are they ideal? Definitely not. But I don't think it's really that big of an issue. I'm working on it gradually, but it is a long process. I do bodybuilding if eggs, eggs, cheese, butter, and curd are all that is available. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can gain muscle as a vegan, so throw in some eggs, throw in some cheese, and you are absolutely good to go, my friend. You don't need meat to build a good body. I think it can help. I like meat. I think it's delicious. Eating the ravaged flesh of my enemies is awesome. I hear the savage cries of the existential existence echo in the night. The blood runs down my neck as I feast ravenously. Moving on. Is it okay to do squats and conventional deadlift twice per week on an upper-lower split? Squats, definitely. Conventional deadlift, I generally keep to once per week. It's possible to do it twice per week, or maybe even 3 times per week. But keep in mind that if you're going close to failure or high volume, high RPE, etc., it's going to be very, very taxing. So I wouldn't really suggest that twice per week. So I would use a lighter variation, that second hinging movement. So pause deadlifts, RDL, maybe some speed deadlifts would be okay. That kind of thing. A lighter variation just to train the technique, train the movement pattern, back extensions, that kind of thing, to really work the muscles but not tax the nervous system, the spine as much. So is sumo deadlift still effective for back gains? Yes, absolutely. You can still make lat, trap, spinal erector gains with sumo deadlift, but I think conventional is going to be a better way to do it just because it's less hip dominant. You're going to be in a more inclined position, and thus it's going to stress the lats more to pull the bar back towards you because you're more inclined. It's going to stress the traps more because you're getting sort of more of this action. So you're more lower traps, more mid traps. Upper traps is probably roughly the same. And then spinal erector is definitely more conventional, although I still get sore spinal erectors from sumo deadlifting. A lot of it depends on your mechanics and where the motion is coming from, where the tension is being directed in your body. In the minimum cardio, if time is an issue, does HIIT take the place of LISS? So does high intensity interval training take the place of low intensity steady state? I would say absolutely. Yeah, there's no real need to do long distance steady state cardio. I do it very, very seldomly. I don't even do that much cardio in general. When I'm cutting, when I'm trying to lose fat, yeah, I might do a little bit. But I don't think it's going to be as necessary as some people say. I would say lifting and a little bit of HIIT is absolutely going to put you in great shape. Intensity is still important when it comes to cardio. Also, I think just keeping a high step count can take the place of low intensity steady state. So if you're getting in, 10K steps per day, that really does add up in terms of keeping you lean, burning calories, and maybe not keeping you in great shape physically, like in terms of your cardiovascular system, but in terms of body composition, absolutely. Can I use intermittent fasting for body recomposition with an emphasis on gaining muscle? Yeah, absolutely. I put a video on gaining muscle and losing fat up above. I will link it in a card. Hopefully it's accurately titled, unlike my words. So yes, you can absolutely gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. As for this workout split, chest, back biceps, and leg, shoulders, triceps, not a huge fan of that. Most chest work is going to work the triceps. Plus it's going to work the shoulders as well. So honestly, I don't really see the point in that. I don't really like combining legs with other body parts. Either work your lower body, work legs, or do full body. When you start really combining legs with other body parts, things start to get really complicated, and there's a reason why it's a non-traditional split, because it's weird and probably not optimal. Next question, how do I progress on isolation exercises like rear delts, biceps, triceps, calves, etc.? So I think you should still track your weights, your sets, your reps, etc. And I think you should still be progressively overloading, just like compound movements. However, there are some things that I don't really bother on tracking. Like if I do some weird curl variation, like a Hercules curl, which, that was just an opportunity for me to flex my biceps, let's be serious. But really, these kind of like weird variations where you're doing something different every single training session, it's not really about the weight, okay? It's just about the effort, the squeeze, the feel, the pump, the contraction, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And so progressively overloading, while it's important, it isn't really going to be the main focus a lot of the time. With a bench press, squat, deadlift, absolutely, progressive overloading is going to be the most important thing, provided technique is good, etc. But for isolation, it sort of takes a back seat sometimes. Next question, what do you think about Pendlay Rows and still controlling the eccentric? I've never personally been a fan of Pendlay Rows. I do Rubish rows, which are like massively cheated Pendlay rows. I think I've done up to 160 kilos, which is far more than I could row in a strict manner. But I don't really like Pendlay rows. I prefer Yates rows just because I feel them working the lats more, the traps more. I can use more weight, even though that's not a huge consideration. It's more just like I can feel the movement more. And when I'm in a very bent over position and I'm rowing strictly, I can still use decent weight. I just don't really feel it in the right places. And honestly, this is one movement that I don't really like. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. That doesn't mean you might not like it as well. But me personally, it's a no dog. Question, have you ever smoked weed? Yes, I have a couple times, but a long time ago. In China, it is very much illegal, and I've had friends who smoked weed and then got kicked the fuck out of China. I would rather not have that happen, considering I live here, and I've lived here for a long time, and I'm married here. That might make my wife a little bit unhappy, seeing me get kicked out of the country, especially something that I don't really want to do anyway. I'm not a weed guy. I'm more of a coffee guy. So honestly, no. You'll even get kicked out if you smoke weed in the US, then you fly to China, you go to a party, they bust the party, they drug test you, they find weed in your system, you'll still get kicked out. So it's pretty strict and it's not really worth doing for me. An interesting one. Instead of buying a training plan, can I pay you to play Fortnite with me? It's been real lonely since my wife left me again. Well, that is definitely not my expertise since I've never played that game before, but no, it's still a no. But still a no. Would you recommend yoga or stretching between lifting days on days off? I've been training powerlifting style for years and noticed my joints are getting stiffer over time. Yeah, sure. I think yoga in particular is pretty good. Static stretching, maybe not that great. Maybe some specific areas, hip flexors, adductors, sure, maybe. But I think for most people, dynamic stretching or just using that range of motion is going to be sufficient. Make sure you warm up well. If you're finding like you're not getting range of motion on the bench press, stretch out your pecs, really practice arching. If you're not hitting depth in the squat, make sure your ankle range of motion is going to be sufficient. Make sure you are getting down into that bottom position, so pause squats can help. On the deadlift, it's mostly just practicing the movement, but maybe stretching your adductors can help. And a lot of it is just staying active and not sitting so much. If you sit a lot of time, like I do at the computer, basically 12 to 14 hours per day, you're going to find that your hips get stiff just because they're in the same position a lot of the time. So if you can avoid that, if you can get up every 30 or 40 minutes, that can help a lot, more than just trying to stretch your way out of those bad positions. Next question, is having cycles with varying intensity and volume as important for hypertrophy as strength training? I would say it's less important, but still a factor. So if you're strength training, performance is always the goal. So you always want to be getting stronger, and thus managing fatigue, I feel, is going to be more important. If you can't perform, it's a big issue with powerlifting training or with weightlifting training. If you can't hit your numbers, you're going backwards, and that's not a good situation. With bodybuilding, hypertrophy training, etc., if you can't hit your numbers, it's honestly not that big a deal. If you accumulate more fatigue, to a certain extent, it's fine. You don't want a shit ton of fatigue. You don't want, more fatigue than you just completely tank your performances. But because performance is not the actual goal, a little bit more fatigue is acceptable, and thus you don't need as much cycling through intensity. So a powerlifting training, often they will start at like 60 or 70% of 1 rep max with a lot of volume, and then as they go on through the cycle, they will add intensity while eliminating volume, or maybe keeping volume the same. Probably eliminating volume for most cases. So for powerlifting training, you have a very specific goal and a very specific set of ways to get to that goal. For bodybuilding training, it's not as specific because a specific performance is not what you are actually targeting. So I think for bodybuilding training, there's not really that much of a need to modify your rep ranges. If you get strong at 6 to 12 reps, that's fine. You don't ever have to go above 12. You don't really ever have to go below 6. But for powerlifting, there's going to be more rep range variation, and it's going to be cycling towards a specific target. For bodybuilding, you can more or less just progress week to week, adding weight when you can. Maybe going up in volume, maybe going up in weight, maybe going up in RPE, but it'll be more controlled week to week and less variation week to week. Keep in mind, that's just my opinion. The next question, do you think some people exaggerate the natural limit because they are not willing to increase variables further, like volume, intensity, and frequency? Sure, I think in some cases you should be open towards using new techniques, doing higher volume, doing lower volume, more intensity, less intensity, everything to failure, just overloading the system, sometimes cutting back. And I think a lot of people get stuck in a mental rut of always doing things the same way, which can potentially limit growth. On the other hand, I'm not going to gain more than maybe 2 kilos of muscle in a year. That's realistic. That's not like, oh, you're limiting yourself mentally because you can't envision 5 kilos of muscle in a year. I'm not going to gain 5 kilos of muscle in a year unless I take steroids. That's just the reality of it. As you get closer to your genetic, muscular, natural limit, things will slow down. If someone said to me, you have a contract with the devil and you'll gain 2 kilos of muscle per year for the next 5 years, but you will never ever gain more than that or less than that. You are fixed at 2 kilos of muscle per year for the next 5 years. But you have to train the same, everything else is the same, diet, nutrition, etc. But you are locked in to 2 kilos of muscle per year. Honestly, even though it's the devil, I would sign that contract because 2 kilos after 5 or 6 years for a natural is really, really good. All right, the next question, would doing low effort exercises like push-ups, bodyweight squats, etc., taken not to failure a few times per day or many times per day, in addition to the main workout, help, hurt, or be useless? I'm leaning towards useless, but it might help a little bit. I don't think it would hurt unless we're talking like huge amounts of volume and it might impact recovery. But I think most people underestimate recovery, and if you're not going close to failure, it shouldn't really impact recovery. In fact, it might help due to blood flow and just getting more blood flow into the joints, into the tissues, into the muscle, etc. So I'm leaning towards either a slight help. Don't expect like massively better results just from doing a few sets of push-ups or even a lot of sets of push-ups, or it might just be useless. What is your opinion of max effort work and dynamic effort work in conjugate? So for those who don't know, this is the conjugate method promoted by Westside Barbell and Louis Simmons, where you have one day where it's a heavy all-out day, usually 1 to 5 reps, just heavy work on a main movement, kind of traditional stuff. And then you have a second day on the same type of movements where you're doing speed work. So you're doing like 10 sets of 3, very fast with like 40 or 50% of your 1 rep max, maybe even as light as like 30% of your 1 rep max. Personally, I don't really like this. And Louis Simmons has actually said, I don't remember where, so don't ask me to like dig up wherever this was. It was like 5 years ago. He said if he could fit a second max effort work, he would just do that. The speed work is because a lot of these guys are on steroids and their joints are maybe not the best, and so they actually have to do lighter speed work in order to get more touches on the bar without beating themselves up. for most people, if you're natural and if you're not squatting like 1,000 freaking pounds, keep in mind these are equipped lifters who are just bench pressing 1,000 pounds in a shirt, who are squatting over 1,000 pounds in a suit. And so the factors are going to be way, way different from a natural who is lifting raw. Okay, so if you are a natural lifting raw, I don't really see the point in speed work. Just do another more moderate session, more like bodybuilding type of work. And honestly, I don't really see the draw or the appeal in speed work for most people. For some people, it might work. I never really saw any benefit. I've tried it several times in the past over training cycles, and I noticed exactly fuck all transfer to actual lifts. Next question, thoughts on deload and where I learned how to program a training routine. So the first one, deload, I did a full video. I will link it up there. That should have anything you ever want to know about deloading. Why did I say deloading? Anyway, so my personal experience has been personal experience. It's been working with hundreds of people. It's been reading incessantly over the past few years. I have probably read at least 10,000 hours about this kind of stuff over the past few years. I am obsessed with strength training, even though I'm not that good at it. I am obsessed with bodybuilding training, and it's just a lot of reading, a lot of just absorbing information into the bone box. What are your beginner tips and tricks, etc. guide for power building? So this is where you're doing part powerlifting, part bodybuilding combined together. Honestly, for a beginner, it's the same thing. If a beginner came to me and the goal was strength or the goal was size, my program wouldn't be that different. Just get stronger at the main movements, 5 to 10 reps. Okay, maybe 3 to 6 reps sometimes, maybe 8 to 12, maybe 10 to 15. Honestly, rep range I think is overrated in terms of importance, but basically just get stronger. Okay, that is going to be what builds muscle. That is obviously what is going to build strength. Do a variety of accessories, but not too much variety. And basically just progress, eat well, sleep well, etc. This stuff isn't that complicated. Next question, what do I have to do? I have SI joint pain from deadlifts. So again, I haven't had personal experience with this injury. I haven't had any clients with this injury either. This might be related to hip impingement, to hip mobility, to a lack of internal or external rotation. But again, keep in mind what movements are going to trigger it. It could be sumo deadlift, conventional deadlift, Romanian deadlifts. What variations can you do and remain healthy? I think a back extension is going to be a good option to keep mass on that ass, as well as the hamstrings and lower back while you are recovering, but just stay below the threshold of injury when you can, and maybe try to not go so close to failure, not go so heavy, at least for a few months, as you recover. And I combine training for strength and training for size in the same lifting session, i.e. doing regular biceps curls and then 21s in the same session. Yeah, absolutely. There's no need to do only a strength session or only a size session. There's a lot more overlap than people think, and there's no need to specialize too much for most people unless you want to be a very high level powerlifter or a very high level bodybuilder. But yeah, you can mix and match stuff within the same session, totally fine. Next question, if you were to go back in time and change one aspect of your life with regard to fitness, what would it be? Probably choosing better genetics with regards to strength. So it's something I'm really interested in, really passionate about, but I just don't really seem to respond all that well. And it is what it is, Sorry, Mom and Dad, I'm going to have to go back in time and transport my soul into another physical shell. Has to be done. Next question, if my FFMI, or fat-free mass index, which is a measure of overall muscular development, is 19.9 after 1.25 years of proper lifting, I don't think I'll end up with an FFMI of 24 to 26, but do you think 23 is still possible? So, first of all, FFMI is an estimation. You take your height, your weight, but also your body fat percentage. Those first two are very accurate. The third one can be a little bit tricky, so you never know your true FFMI. You can get a pretty good estimation, but it is still an estimation. Second of all, if you've only been lifting a little over a year, I think don't even worry about this. Just do the best you can. The fact that you say 19.9 and 1.25 years of lifting, I can tell you're being a little bit too obsessed with the numbers, and just don't worry about it. Also, keep in mind, 26 is fucking huge. I'm roughly 23. And 26 as a natural, That's like 0.0001% of the population. It is a tiny fragment of the natural population. If someone is 26 and lean, they are probably on steroids. Even 25 is extremely rare. 25 is thrown around as the natural limit. 26 is probably possible, 27 maybe, but you have to keep in mind 24 to 25 is still the genetic elite. So I would say most people just cannot get there. Even everything is perfect, diet, nutrition, supplementation, not steroid supplementation, just normal supplementation. Even if everything is perfect, a lot of people cannot get to 24. And 23 is still pretty decently developed. So first, I wouldn't worry about it. And second, if you do get to 23 or even 22.5, just be happy with what you can do. Question, do bodyweight workouts help in size? I know strength can be built, but how about size? How much volume and intensity? So volume and intensity, it's going to be unique. It's going to be individual. Contact me for a custom plan if you want, where I take 40 questions into account and it can actually give you meaningful information rather than just do 8 sets per week. But yeah, it can absolutely build size. In fact, I would say it's probably better for size than strength. Hi coach, will cardio workouts like jump rope or running after weight training sessions kill gains? I'm 39, newbie to weight gaining. If you're a newbie, probably not, just because you're very sensitive to weight training and you can progress very quickly, even if things aren't perfect. I would say it depends how much. If you're doing an hour of running after your weight training session, definitely not good. Even 30 minutes is probably a little bit excessive, and 20 minutes is probably still going to negatively impact your muscular gains. Slightly, okay? You can still make progress. It really just depends on a lot of factors. If possible, do it at a different time of day. Studies have shown that if you split up the workouts, it's actually going to be better because you can adapt more quickly and more readily when those stresses are split apart. How much can you lift on the big 3? So I did a full video on this titled, Why Am I So Weak? But basically to sum that up, 135 kilos in the ass to grass high bar heels elevated squat, 205 kilos on the sumo deadlift. I've also done 10 by 180 kilos, which is about 90% of 1 rep max. And I've done 115 kilos on the bench press. So I'm definitely not a power lifter, and I'm a lot weaker than a lot of people expect. All right, next question, prevent tendon and joint injuries method. I did a full video on this, 2 videos actually. I will link the first one up above. How do I train for raw athleticism? I did a full video. I will link that above as well. Keep in mind, athleticism sort of varies based on the sport. Athletic, someone is strong, fast, they can, put their body in a variety of positions and be fine, be healthy, be strong, flexible, etc. But it is going to vary based on the sport. And how to know if I'm really training hard enough? Well, you should always just be training harder than last time. It's so simple. Now, I would say go based on your results. If you're progressing, you're training hard enough. If you're not progressing, you're either training too hard or not hard enough, with more people in that not hard enough category. So just go based on how you feel and the results. I go into this in my book. There's a whole section titled How to Make Progress. So definitely pick that up. It's on Amazon. It's $8 and it has 4.9 stars on Amazon. Does a rack pull translate to a bigger deadlift? Maybe. It depends on where the rack is set up. If it's set up above the knees, you can actually get your knees under the bar and you can quarter squat the weight up. This means it's a different movement pattern. Instead of being a hinge, it is a squat, and it's a very short range of motion, and I would say this is going to have exactly a 0 translation to a bigger deadlift. If it's from the knees, exactly the kneecap, it might have a small carryover, but I would say mostly you want to be below the knee to have any kind of meaningful carryover. Normally, 2, 3, 4 inches isn't going to satisfy anyone. But in this case, if it's only 2, 3, or 4 inches above your normal deadlift, this is going to be the optimal, highly satisfactory situation. How to know whether to bulk cut or main gain? This depends on your body fat percentage and your goals. If you are 30% body fat and you want to get leaner, obviously you need to cut. Even if you want to gain muscle at 30% body fat, I would say you probably should cut just based on health factors. For men at least. For women, they can maybe, 30% is still pretty high, but women can typically have about 8 to 10% more body fat just because they have jugs. So It's a technical term, okay? Don't get angry. So basically, where is your body fat percentage? If you are lean and you want to gain muscle, this is where you slow bulk, as I mentioned before. If you are sort of 15 to 20%, this is where it's a sort of gray area, and it depends on your goals. If you don't care that much about leanness and your end physique is not like super shredded bra, you can bulk. If your end goal is like fitness model, fashion, 8-9% body fat, you might want to cut just because you need to get used to being a leaner state of existence. But for most people, I would say below 15% bulk, above 20% cut, and 15 to 20% is going to be a sort of gray area. Next one, how are Chinese gyms different from the US in terms of atmosphere, culture, equipment? I've actually never been to a gym in the United States. I've been in China for 9 years. Occasionally I've gone back, but I haven't been back to the 48 states in about 5 or 6 years, I would say. So I started lifting about 5 or 6 years ago, so I've actually never been to a gym in the United States. So it's a little bit harder to make a comparison, but I work with enough people in the States and, you know, I know a little bit about US gyms. I would say the strength standards are a lot lower. If I do a 3, let alone a 4 plate deadlift, everyone is like fucking staring and they're just blown away and they're like talking to their friends and they're like talking about me in Mandarin, which I can understand, but they don't think I can understand. And it's definitely, you know, if you deadlift 3 plates in the US, no one gives a shit, right? It's not a big deal. It's you know, probably a third of the world record in your weight class or something. So it's really not that big a deal. Equipment, I think, is pretty much the same. Culture, sometimes people will like steal plates when they should know that I'm still using them. And I've had situations where I unracked a bench press or a squat and the bar was uneven because some motherfucker stole a plate. I don't think that would really happen in the US, but it happens fairly frequently in China. I actually did a whole video on Chinese gyms, so you can check that out. I could easily talk like half an hour about this. Some good, some bad. Everyone is generally very friendly, but yeah, the whole video up there. Would it be possible to gain muscle while in a deficit, especially if you have a lot of body fat? Yeah, absolutely. This is called recomping. My clients achieve it all the time, and I'm not bragging at all because that should be pretty common, especially if you are above 20% body fat and you are not super muscularly developed already. This should be the expectation, to gain strength, gain size, gain muscle while losing body fat. I don't know why people still think this is magic. It's not, especially based on the literature. It is very, very common. People over 65 do it. Women do it, beginners do it, intermediates do it, even more advanced athletes can potentially do it, and even do it when natural too. The next question has a bunch of details. This is, you know, a prime candidate for a custom plan. A Q&A session is more general questions that everyone can benefit from. It's not me detailing a plan for you. I already do this for a living. I'm already very busy, and so I can no longer write training plans for free. They are still very affordable, and they are very detailed, and people are getting great results. So feel free to contact me. My information is in the description below. Email or Instagram DM if you want to get your hands on a custom plan. Does lifting weights at a young age stunt growth? No. Is cupping helpful? So this is not cupping the balls. This is actually where they put cups on your back. I guess it's a heated cup and it brings blood into the area. Sometimes when I'm walking around here in China, I will see people with like red circular marks on like their fucking neck, on their arms, on their back is the most common area. And I think this is mostly just to get blood flow into the area. I haven't looked at any research, but I would think anything that causes extra blood flow is not a bad thing. It looks a little weird, but maybe it has benefits. I haven't looked into it. Maybe I can do a whole video on it, but I can't really say for sure either way. Next question, dating in China. So I'm actually married and I feel like it's sort of disrespectful to my wife to go into this. I do have a lot of good stories, you know, I must say. Player. Best type of cardio for losing fat and keeping muscle. I would say anything but running. They actually did a study, I forget where it was. Don't ask me to link it, you'll just have to trust me on this one. It compared running and cycling. And cycling was actually better for muscular growth compared to running. I think this is because running has an eccentric muscle contraction component, and therefore it has a lot of pounding, it creates a lot of stress, and it can impact recovery quite a bit. If I am going to the gym and my goal is muscle growth, gaining muscle, then I do not run. I'll run when I don't have access to a gym just because I enjoy it, but if my goal is to make gains, I don't run. I think it's possible. I think you can still develop a pretty decent physique if you run a little bit, but if you're running marathons, if you're running like 10 or 15 miles per day, it is going to be a little bit difficult to gain muscle, especially if you are natural. If you look at these guys who are like running fucking triathlons all the time and they're still like 200 pounds and shredded, they're on steroids. Okay, every single fucking time they're on steroids or at least testosterone, because the level of stress that causes, if you're natural, means that you're not going to be getting any kind of muscle development. I can't do any pull-ups yet. Reverse pull-ups aren't helping me. What should I do? So I'm guessing by reverse pull-ups you mean jumping up and then lowering yourself. I would say use a band as assistance if possible. Static holds in a single position can also help. I would say Australian pull-ups or inverted rows can help as well, where it's a little bit easier because you're not lifting 100% of your body weight. Pull-downs can help as well, and also losing fat. If you lose 8% body fat or 10% body fat, I can guarantee that your pull-ups are going to get easier, and that's often the key from going from 0 pull-ups to like 5 pull-ups or even 10 pull-ups, just losing some body fat. Is the pressure or pain necessary in the muscle you are targeting? So I assume by pain you mean discomfort or like a burning feeling or some kind of uncomfortable feeling. Pain is never good and you should always avoid it. If you're getting like knee pain when you're squatting, that's not good. And pushing through it is never going to be a good situation. So pain you should always avoid. Discomfort is fine. However, you don't necessarily need to like feel the muscle, bro, to be gaining muscle. If I'm doing squats, I don't necessarily feel the same contraction as I do with a leg extension. This is because when you're doing a leg extension, you can actually squeeze the muscle because there is tension at the end range of motion. At the top, you can contract the freaking quads. You can squeeze them like a freaking pomegranate. But for the squat, you shouldn't squeeze your quads at any point in the movement. In fact, if you squeeze your quads at full lockout, that is a good way to mess up your knees, because you can actually, you've seen this on leg presses maybe, where they squeeze the quad, they hyperextend their knee, and they really mess themselves up. So I would say not every movement is going to be a feeling type of movement. It's a lot like relationships. How can a vegetarian person get high quality protein? This is pretty simple actually. You just eat foods with high quality protein. Simple. So tofu, beans, vegetables that have protein, milk, eggs, all that good stuff. Next question, is it harder to track progressive overload with pyramid style training compared to just sets across? Can you give an example? Yeah, absolutely. If you're doing, say, 5 sets of 6 compared to 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, it's going to be a little bit difficult to track, because for 5 sets of 6, it's very clear when you increase a weight. Whereas if you're doing 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, it can be a little bit tricky, because if you feel like you can go up in weight, this might blur into another set. So for example, if you do a set of 10 and then the next set of 8, that might actually be the same weight. Even if you're supposed to be pyramiding, if you do a hard set of 10, a hard set of 8 after might be a very, very similar weight. So a lot of it depends on how hard you are pushing the sets and how quickly you want to progressively overload. And it can be a little bit tricky, but just the general idea is still add weight over time. It's also trickier because when you're doing, say, 5 sets of 6, you can increase the weight and then decrease the reps doing a double progression system, which I outline here. But with a pyramid style of training, that gets a little bit blurry. All right, the next question. Cool. Next question. Can I gain muscle with just barbell and plates at home? Yes, absolutely. I would say most of the exercises I do in the gym are barbell and plates anyway. And if you can do that at home, perfectly fine. I would also get a power rack so you can squat. I would get a bench so you can bench. And next on the list would probably be dumbbells at an appropriate weight. For me, that might be like, I could do a lot with 30 kilo dumbbells. 40 would be nice as well. You don't need a ton of dumbbells. You can do a lot with just a few. But yeah, you can definitely build muscles with plates and barbells at home. Feel free to contact me for a custom plan where I can take into account what you actually have, and I can write up something that is optimal and sensible as well. Next question, do you have to retract your scapula for the bench press? Yes, but you don't have to have a huge arch. You see powerlifters and like their head is touching their ass and it just looks horrible. You don't have to do that, but you do need to learn how to arch a little bit. So you have to tuck the shoulders, you have to be able to contract your back and keep that position in order to bench press safely. If you're like this and you're bench pressing, you gonna get fucked up. It's only a matter of time, and usually it's not very much time at all. So definitely learn how to control your body and how to get in a good position from which to bench press from. PRs in compound exercises. So I already talked about squat, bench, deadlift, somewhere over here-ish on the screen, maybe over here. I don't know exactly how it'll work, but for press, I've done 80 kilos for the overhead press, strict overhead press. I've push pressed 100 kilos. I've done Z presses with 70 kilos, and I think I've done 75 as well, where you're seated on the ground. I did a video on that. I'll put it up there. For rows, I've done up to 160 kilos, but again, pretty cheated. Strict rows, I typically do 80 to 100 kilos. I think I've done 120 kilos for fairly strict rows. Sort of gets a little blurry between strict and cheated. For curls, I've cheat curled 75 kilos for 60 kilos for maybe 6 or 7 or so. For pull-ups, I've done 45 kilos for 1 or 2 reps. Full dead hang, chin over bar, etc., using a neutral grip. For dips, I've done 40 kilos for 8 or 10 reps or so. More or less full range of motion down to at least parallel. Most of my benching, I do close grip, and I've done 105 kilos fully paused and a fairly narrow grip. I prefer doing a lot of stuff narrow grip. It just feels better, which is why my triceps are decently decent. And I don't do the like traditional powerlifting moves a lot. So I don't do a whole bunch of low bar back squat. I don't do a whole bunch of like wide grip, super arch bench press, just because I don't really care. I'm not going into a powerlifting competition. I'm not a powerlifter at all. So I tend to do movements that are more sort of bodybuilding style. Where did you learn so much about programming? Was it all through experience? Partly experience, but partly working with clients and mostly reading, just reading incessantly, as I said before. I think reading is the best path towards knowledge. YouTube is great and all, and you can discover a lot of hidden gems, and I do think video is great, but reading is, for the foreseeable future, always going to be the best path towards information. What advice would you give a dieter who binges or binge eats? So a few strategies. One would be don't buy shitty food. If you know peanut butter is something you binge on, don't keep it in the house and probably don't eat it at all. Load up on fiber. If you're full, you're much less likely to binge. So load up on vegetables. A fiber supplement can help a ton. Maybe a multivitamin as well. If you're binging, you might be craving a particular nutrient. Pregnant mothers eat all kinds of weird fucking food just because they're craving a certain nutrient. So a multivitamin might be able to help that. Load up on protein as well. Who binges on chicken breasts and broccoli? Fucking no one. It's always the high carb, high calorie, high fat, delicious foods that people binge on. If they're not in the house, it's really hard to binge on them. So use your discipline when shopping, and don't go shopping when you're hungry. Additionally, if you live in a highly populated area, also known as a city, delete your delivery app. Don't even use it. Keep the food in the house that you're going to eat that day. I know if you're really busy, okay, maybe shop for a few days at once, but don't keep a freaking stockpile of food that is, high calorie, very satiating, very delicious. If there were some muffins in the house, that's a rhetorical question, because there would not be muffins in the house because I would have already fucking eaten them. Okay? Even me, if there is delicious, carb-heavy, carb-dense, delicious food in the house, it's going to be consumed. So use your discipline earlier so you don't have to use it later. What's your favorite post-workout meal? I'm very prone to rice, maybe just from living in China. I like bread as well, but I like anything with rice and meat that doesn't have a lot of fat. So, quote unquote clean foods. So something with a base of rice, some meat on the top, a little bit of vegetable as well, and I am good to go. All right, the next question, should I stick, I assume that's what it is, should I stick with chin-ups for 5 to 6 reps if I feel it more in my biceps, my arms, and my joints and tendons instead of my back? If your goal is to build a big back and you don't feel a movement in your back, maybe it's not a good movement, especially if you feel it in your joints, in your tendons, you feel like really sore or achy, not even sore, just pain afterwards. Just get rid of it. Okay, for chin-ups, you really have to rotate, and for a lot of people, they get elbow issues, even wrist issues, just because you're in this very, very rotated position. So I would stick with neutral grip, maybe overhand, rows, machines, pull-downs. There's no need to do chin-ups or any other exercise. Best way to increase pull-up reps besides grease the groove. So grease the groove is where you do high frequency many times per day, not really close to failure. So if you can do 10 pull-ups, you do sets of like 3, 4, 5 reps many times per day to grease the groove. I would say just get stronger. If your 1 to 3 rep max on pull-ups goes up, your reps will almost always go up as well. It's something called post-activation potentiation, which is a very long way of saying after lifting a heavy weight, a lighter weight seems lighter. So if you can strap 40, 50, 60 kilos to your body and do a few, 2 or 3, maybe even 1 rep, strict reps, close to failure, then you take that heavy ass weight off of you, body weight is going to feel so easy that you'll be able to do more reps. This happens instantly, but it also happens over time. If you can get stronger in low reps, your high reps will almost always go up as well. All right, this next question sort of has 2 parts. It's by the same person. I'll put both up on the screen. The first part is, are the Sway Boys natty? It feels so discouraging seeing them bench press 225 to 310 after 3 to 4 months of training, whereas I have been lifting consistently, training, etc., eating right, and my bench is only 135 after 7 months. Stay in your lane. Okay, just do the best you can. Everyone is going to be different. Looking at other people, if they're natural, if they're not natural, who gives a shit? It's them. It's their life, their body, their choices, their genetics, and you're in a different situation. Just do the best you can. Okay? I see tons of people who are stronger than me. Instagram is like the fastest way to either keep your ego in check or get discouraged or get inspired. The choice is up to you. You can look at them and say, wow, they're doing really great. Or you can look at them and say, wow, they're doing really great. Why am I not doing great? It's just a comparison, okay? You can do it in a positive way or in a not so positive way. The choice is up to you. They might even be using fake weights. Hey! It had to be said at some point. All right, the next question, how to go hard on shoulders and chest during a push-pull legs program. So push days are going to be chest, but also shoulders and triceps as well. Yeah, you can alternate priority. 1 week, put your pressing first, then put your pushing after, then switch. That is going to be completely fine. I would say prioritize by body part. If your chest is lagging, like it is for me, you might want to put pushing exercises first so that you are more fresh. For me, shoulders are not really a lagging part, so I tend to put them later in the workout. So basically just prioritize based on what you want to grow. If you want to grow everything equally, if you're more of a beginner, then yeah, alternate week by week. That's fine. Okay, next question. I am nervous about increasing calories to build muscle. I am on 2,000 calories per day, 15% body fat, and lifting 5 times per week. So I assume you are nervous about putting on body fat. If you're 15%, you're not super lean, but you're not fat either. So this is, again, in that gray area where it's not 100% clear if you should bulk or cut. I would say it depends on your end goal physique. If you want to be super lean, you should probably actually cut down a little bit farther before you start to bulk up. Maybe 10, maybe 12% body fat, somewhere around there. If you don't really care about being lean, which you clearly do based on the fact that you're nervous, I would say maybe bulk slowly. Okay, bulk, get into maybe a 200 calorie surplus per day, roughly. Gain weight as slowly as possible and try to increase strength on your main lifts, and that should minimize the fat gain. You have to be able to mentally accept some fat gain. At some points, it's going to happen and you can't maintain shredded abs or even very clear abs year round. As a natural probably not going to happen and probably not going to be optimal for muscle growth. You can build your muscle and then maintain a leaner physique later, but when you are still building your physique, you need to accept getting a little bit fluffy some of the time. Next one, how to lose weight while maintaining muscle mass. Boom, I'll link a card up above on how to body recomp. Protein, sleep, progressively overloading. There's a couple of other factors up there, but definitely check that video out as it details exactly how to optimally do this process. If I can only do 2.5 pull-ups, should I keep doing negatives or should I go to doing 5 sets of 1, for example? I would say keep in mind you should be doing other exercises as well in a higher rep range. So keep doing your pull downs, your rows, your curls, your other compound movements that are going to actually be helping you in that sort of 8 to 12 rep range. And then I would just do, 5 sets of 1, maybe doubles. Keep trying to progressively overload whenever you can. I would say when you can do pull-ups, you no longer have to do negatives and you've sort of graduated as long as you can do singles and doubles on a consistent basis. In which non-US countries do you see fitness and other weightlifting related sports growing rapidly? I would say China. When I first came here 9 years ago, there were gyms, but not very many of them. Often there was not really very much knowledge. Trainers sucked. Trainers, for the most part, still suck. But there's so many more gyms. I mean, there's like 5 times as many gyms. There's gyms on every freaking street corner. So it's become a lot more prolific. Fitness is a luxury product. If you are poor, if you're a developing nation, often it isn't a priority because people are just trying to survive, and fitness isn't really going to be a big deal because you just want to make money and live a better life. But as things sort of go up and the country gets more developed, people start to realize, oh, I need to freaking take care of my body because it falls apart if I don't actually take care of it. And I think that's what's happening in China. There's a lot more wealthy people than there were even 10 years ago, and thus a lot more people are prioritizing their health, their wellness, their fitness, and the gym. When do you see the current climate of diet zealotry ending? Probably never. Let's face it, most people aren't that smart, and they like extreme stuff, and they're easily marketable too. And thus, I think extreme diets and just silly fads will continue to take place. I mean, if you tell people, don't eat shitty food, exercise, sleep well, that's not really marketable. If I tell people, don't do anything extreme, just eat better food and cut the shit out of your diet, that is going to be what they need to hear. But a lot of people are going to blow that off and say, okay, well, isn't there some kind of like trick or hack or something I can do that gets around all that hard work and all that discipline? No. Okay? Someone might try to sell you on it, some stupid program or system that is selling a lie, but I'm not going to do that. However, honestly, I see things are getting worse instead of better. And even if I put out good information that is quality and accurate and actually going to be useful and practical and pragmatic, most people are not going to do that because they want your fucking money. Straight up. Next question, how much leg work to grow massive trunks? So I assume you mean swimming trunks and you're competing in men's physique, in which case you don't need legs at all because they don't really matter. Ooh, burn. Squats, Romanian deadlifts, back extensions, curls, a bit of leg extensions, lunges, front squats, Anderson squats, all the basic movements. Don't need to be too complicated. My book does have a lot of variations, but just find 2 to 3 squat movements, 2 to 3 hinge movements, and a few isolation movements that can, work for you and you feel well and don't get you injured, and you're good to go. In terms of how much, in terms of how many sets, that's going to be very individual. You can contact me for a custom plan for the millionth time, and I will set you up with something that is suitable and appropriate for you. But just based on the question, I don't really have a set number of sets that I send people without any other information. All right, the next one, how to calculate maintenance calories after a cut. I would say just check how fast you were losing weight before, check your calories from before, which I assume you're counting if you're going to be counting them after, and calculate what it should be. You can also use calculators online, but honestly, your own experience is going to be much better. And, if you're losing weight at a pound a week, then add, roughly 500 calories back in, and that should be roughly your maintenance. you need to be checking your weight. You need to be weighing yourself on a regular basis, preferentially daily, and checking the trend line to see where you are going. If you are not maintaining at your maintenance calories, guess what? It's not your maintenance calories. Sure, you can have water fluctuations, but if you're like gaining weight pretty steadily on your maintenance calories, well, it wasn't really your maintenance calories. So check your weight and adjust as needed. Next question, what are the benefits and drawbacks of being short in fitness? So one advantage is that if the door to the gym is really low, you won't have to duck and you might not actually have to hit your head, where those other taller motherfuckers might actually be hitting their heads. Big advantage, very underrated. I would say shorter people are often more relatively strong. So if they're a certain weight, they might be able to lift like a double body weight squat more easily. Speaking of squatting will often be easier if you're shorter. Same for bench, just because you have shorter limbs and you're more compact, you have less range of motion, better leverages, etc. Deadlifting will sometimes be a little bit more tricky, but you can still have a good deadlift if you're shorter. I would say in terms of bodybuilding, most really good bodybuilders aren't that tall. If you look at the average height of Mr. Olympia winners, I think it's like 5'8" or something. A lot of them are very successful, even closer to 5 feet. So I would say because you have a smaller frame, you can fill out that frame a lot more easily. I have some clients who are like 6'4", 6'6", and for them, especially if they're natural, it's going to be really, really hard to actually fill out their frame. Even if their arm looks bigger, even if their arm is bigger, it looks smaller because it has a longer, more real estate to actually fill out. So I would say, there's definitely some good. In terms of drawbacks, you might not be as absolutely strong. If you look at the world deadlift record, Hafthor, he's freaking a mile tall and he can deadlift a ton. And this is just because he has more real estate to actually put muscle, which can help move the weight. General advice for 15-year-olds. I would say the number one piece of advice would be don't do anything stupid. If you're not sure if something is stupid, it's probably stupid. Okay, so like partner assisted curls or trying to deadlift a weight with your friend together, or like assisted reps on the bench press, or bench pressing alone late at night without a power rack. If you're not sure if something is stupid, probably not a good idea. Push press or strict press? I can definitively say 100% absolutely yes. Okay, they're both great movements. They're very different. I would say for shoulder development, strict press for sure. If you are push pressing, in terms of the shoulder development, you're missing like all of this range of motion. Okay, you're only really catching the weight and locking out. Maybe this, depending on how high you can fling the weight. But generally speaking, it's not going to be a great shoulder developer. However, you can move more weight and you can maybe lower the eccentric, getting a nice overload, a nice higher weight than you can actually use for a strict press. Plus, if you want to transition into, not that kind of transition, if you want to actually transition into Olympic weightlifting, I think this is an awesome movement because it trains you to move explosively and you're using heavier weight, and it is fairly similar to a jerk. Definitely not identical, but again, it's dipping, driving, exploding upward, and then locking out. Whereas with a jerk, it's more explosive. You dip under, and then you catch it with, ideally, fully locked out arms. So I think if you're a bodybuilder and you're interested in Olympic weightlifting, the push press is an awesome movement that you should definitely incorporate into your training. Next question, is calisthenics good for gaining muscle at home? Yes, absolutely. I would say bodyweight movements are going to be the best way to gain or maintain muscle at home if you don't have access to a gym or to real weights. I don't really like bands. I don't really like anything else. I would say bodyweight movements, pull-ups, dips are going to be go-tos, inverted rows, handstand push-ups, that kind of thing can absolutely build upper body muscle. And then for lower body, jump squats, Bulgarian split squats, lunges, that kind of thing. I actually did a full video in quarantine like ages ago that I will link up above. But yes, they are really good for gaining and maintaining muscle. Maybe not as good as the weight room. The weight room exists for a reason, to gain muscle. So I think they're not going to be as ideal, but they're still pretty good. Effect of occasional smoking on gym performance. Basically zero. I mean, it might have some impact on high rep squatting or deadlifting, lunges, etc. But I think for like bodybuilding style training, probably not any effect at all, like almost nothing. And then for like weightlifting or powerlifting, zero effect. The old Soviet and Bulgarian weightlifters, they used to have smoke breaks in between sets. So it should have basically zero effect. It shouldn't affect muscle growth at all. It might suppress appetite a little bit, which you need to watch out for. You know, if you're smoking a lot and you're eating like 1,500 calories as a man, yeah, you probably won't gain very much muscle. So I think it's important to measure your appetite and make sure you're getting in enough calories. But it shouldn't actually directly negatively impact anything. Although obviously it's not ideal for your health. So don't smoke, or do smoke, whatever. What is my analysis on Geoff? Shit.
Honey, give me some lemon tea.
What is my analysis of Geoff Nippard's power building program? So I haven't seen it. Obviously, it just came out and I haven't bought it. But I like Geoff. I like all of his content. I wish he would upload more. He uploads, once every week or two, it seems. And I watch like basically all of his content. I really like his content. I think it is great. We've actually chatted a little bit. He gave me feedback on my channel maybe back sometime in April, and we've occasionally chatted since then. He's a really nice guy, very helpful, very genuine. And based on his other content, I would say you cannot go wrong with any of his programs. They're very well thought out, very sensible. Everything is laid out in a very clear manner from what I've seen, and definitely give it a shot and see if it works. I think it's all of his programs are really good. So yeah. All right, the next question, role of habits in training and role of training in life. Holy shit, bro, that's a big question. Role of habits in training. I would say you can classify habits into good and bad, obviously. You should always be trying to experiment with your training, see if you can optimize things based on your current goals. And you have to keep in mind, some habits are not going to help you at all and will actually get in your way, whereas other habits will be good because they can kind of put things on autopilot. So you go to the gym on your push days and you just do your face pulls, you warm up, you do the exercises that help you, that you found to work. But you shouldn't be too much on autopilot, because that's when you get hurt, or that's when you don't get that much out of the exercise. You really do need to focus during training. Habits can get you to the gym, but if you're just doing everything based on habit when you get to the gym, and you're not thinking about things, and you're not focused on things, and you're not actually being cognizant of what you are actually doing, I think that's where habits can actually get in the way of making good progress. The role of training in life, I've always thought that training was just a small part of life. Training is maybe an hour per day, a couple hours at most, and then you have a bunch of other hours that are just as important, if not more important. I see a lot of people who, they're just obsessed with working out. Like, that's not just the highlight of their day, it's everything. It's the whole part of their day, and they never develop any kind of other meaning to their life apart from just working out. I think that is sort of sad and mildly pathetic, and you should strive to become a well-rounded person, of which working out is a part of your life, but it's just that, a part of your life.
Fucking wisdom!
Best bodybuilding exercises for the circle of power. So I define the circle of power as your neck, your traps, your shoulders, your upper chest, maybe your lats as well. But this is what gives you the appearance of bigness. Okay, so if you're talking to someone, no one gives a shit about your legs, okay? Put your calves away, bra. No one gives a fuck, okay? It is this area that contributes to a look of athleticism, of aesthetics, of looking impressive when you have your clothes on, especially. No one cares if you have abs, okay? They can't even see it if you wear a shirt like normal people. So I would say the circle of power, I already did a whole video on that. Maybe you've already seen it based on the question, the way it was phrased, but maybe I'll have another video with more exercises on how to develop this area. Next question, what are the best bodybuilding accessory exercises for a strength athlete? So I already did a video on accessory exercises for the deadlift, and I'll put it up there in a card thingamabob. For squat and bench, I will definitely do a video on that as well. The deadlift video actually did really, really poorly. It was a few months ago, but it did, I think it was number 10 out of 10 on my watch videos at the time. But I think it's important, so I will definitely do a strength video, accessory video on squat and bench. I would say the best approach is taking a bodybuilder mindset when it comes to your accessory movements. So don't just be maxing out on a bunch of different random exercises. Really see what are your weaknesses and then approach it and do a lot of reps at that exercise. So sets of 5, sets of 8, sets of 10, sets of 12, really just build everything up. This is going to build size, but it's also going to build a more well-rounded physique, but also a more well-rounded strength athlete as well. What type of credentials do you think are necessary and helpful in order to coach people? So I have 0 credentials, none, 0, not one, and yet I make a living coaching people. I don't think I've ever had a potential client ask me for a credential. Most of them are already fans of my work. They've read my stuff on Quora, on Medium, on Instagram, on YouTube as well. And so they've watched on YouTube, I guess. But they have, already been fans of mine, and I think it's not 100% necessary to have a certification or some kind of document saying, this guy knows his shit. Because a lot of people who have these credentials, or even are doctors, they don't know their shit. So don't just go with a coach because they have a piece of paper. Actually read their writing, see if they know what they're talking about, and I don't think it's 100% necessary. And this is something that I don't have a lot of knowledge about because I've never even considered a certification because I've seen so many that are absolute garbage. So I would say if you feel like you need it, if you feel like it's helpful or, in a personal way or professional way or can help you get more clients, go for it. I can't really give you any kind of specific certifications or any kind of specific recommendations of certifications because I just don't know. I haven't really looked into it. Maybe go for a NASM. I think that's a thing, right? But anyway, I would say just build up your knowledge, learn how to help people, learn how to coach in a practical and meaningful and a way that actually gets good results, and you'll get quite a bit of recommendations from word of mouth. Leverage social media, leverage these other platforms as much as you can, and you should be fine without any certifications if you actually know what you're talking about. Also, try to prove to people that you can do it yourself. That definitely helps as well. And do the best you can. Are hand grippers actually useful or actually good for wrist muscles? Well, the wrist is actually a joint. That would be like saying knee muscles. So I think you mean the forearms, and yeah, they can be good. I haven't used them really extensively myself, but definitely they can be good. Personally, for forearms, I prefer wrist curls, just doing heavy, unstrapped work, strapless, no strap-ons, nothing at all. You're just grabbing the bar. That is going to grow the forearms really, really well as well. Reverse curls, normal curls, and that should be enough. Farmer's walks are really good as well. And I don't think there's really a need for any kind of grip work for most people, but it can help. Next one, can you write an answer on Quora correcting knock knees? So I'm a decent writer, I would say. Better than average, not amazing, but decent. But even me, my words cannot actually fix physical problems. Reading your content on Quora and then following you on Instagram and YouTube, I'm really flattered by your content. That is not a question, but thank you. Use on full body 5 times per week workout by Geoff Nippard. Another Geoff Nippard question. The Nippard slippards in again. I like it. I think last year I did full body basically 7 times per week. And it can work, but it is very hard to keep up more than a month or so. You tend to get worn down, a little bit more overall fatigue. I think it can work well for short periods of time, but I think you're better off going to something more reasonable, both before and after, and using it as a sort of a way to jumpstart growth. So I wouldn't do it 365 days per year. Some people try to do it. I think it can get good results. The main problem with it is that you always have to hold back. Every single day, if you take too many sets to failure on the big compound movements, you just won't be able to come back the next day and give any kind of meaningful performance. I think he sets things up in a very reasonable manner, so it's not too much of a concern. But if you go too hard, you'll absolutely pay for it. So this is where it requires a little bit of knowing yourself and a little bit of training wisdom, and I definitely don't suggest it for beginners at all. How not to be overwhelmed by all the new information if you're a noob trying to get into fitness. That's actually pretty simple. Only follow my channel. So if you're following other channels, just delete them. I think there's a tab somewhere on YouTube and you can unsubscribe. You're going to want to go ahead into that page and just unsubscribe from every other channel except for this one. Same thing for other social media, other platforms. Just go through, unfollow people if they're not me. If it's not my name, just unfollow them. Go ahead and do that right now. Click away from this video temporarily and just go do that. Then come back and that should be fine.
Only listen to what I say. Only listen to my words. Only consume my fitness content, and you'll be fine.
Intermediate Lazy Man's Plan in Sweat. Can I follow it 6 times per week? So Sweat is my book that is on Amazon for $7.99 US cents. And it's gotten really good reviews. It has 4.9 stars at the moment. Everyone is really happy with it, so you should definitely pick up a copy as well. And it has training templates, one of which is the Intermediate Lazy Man's Workout. It is 3 more or less full body workouts per week. And no, you cannot do it 6 times per week. I mean, you can if you really want to, but I don't advise it because that doesn't really follow the spirit of the plan. It is for lazy people who aren't going to be training every day and only want to go to the gym 3 days per week. And it's a full body split, so that is fine on 3 days per week. But if you morph that to 6 times per week, it is suddenly something very, very different. So no. How to get a mind-muscle connection with the chesticles. This is going to be different for every person, obviously. I like doing cross-body front raises, where you take a dumbbell, probably pretty light, like 4 or 5 kilos, something like that, and you squeeze across the chest, one arm at a time, really focusing on the upper chesticles. You can do both arms at a time, and this is a good way to really feel that contraction. You can also do full range of motion flies. Anything that gets the chest sore is going to be good. You can get your chest sore with a bunch of flies. I'm not a huge fan of dumbbell flies, but if your shoulders are durable, they're pretty good as long as you keep your positioning well. But I would say get sore and then really try to feel and squeeze, feel the body working. For a lot of people, the anterior delt, myself included, it tends to take over. So really focus on tucking and then squeezing and working with the elbow. If you're out here, that's a lot of front delt. So you need to tuck and then really focus on, this is where a machine can actually work really well. A chest press machine, you can actually focus on using the chest and tucking the elbows and squeezing inward with the chest. I find that arching properly in the bench press is really important for this. If you're not arched and you're out here, that's one, going to be stressful on the shoulder joint, but it's also going to be a lot of front delt and probably triceps as well. I would say higher reps as well in the bench press. If I do sets of like 20 with a wide grip, really feeling the stretch and the squeeze, that is going to be better than heavier but low reps. So it is quite a bit of personal experimentation, but it's one of those things that can take a long time. When are you going to release a nutrition book amazing like Sweat? It could be months, probably months. Sweat originally took months and months to compile. I originally wrote it just as a Word document because people would ask me training questions on WeChat, which is China's biggest social media platform. So friends would ask me questions about training and I would get bored or lazy of answering them. So I would just send them this document. And it got bigger and bigger and bigger until it was like hundreds of pages. And then I finally turned it into a book. But that compilation process took months and months and months. And so writing a book, especially a quality book, takes a ton of time. Plus, I think for nutrition, I would have to have a lot more of citations, science-based, etc., and that would take a lot of time as well. A book on training, you don't really need to cite, why is a bench press good? Why should you do this movement? There's no real science or real citation behind a lot of it. But for nutrition, I think there would have to be in order to back up what I say, especially because nutrition is such a sensitive topic and it just varies so much for different people. I think my next book would be more on the hormonal side of things. So a book on probably how your hormones influence your life as well as muscle building and fat loss. That's something that I'm more interested in. That would also be a ton of research, but that's probably where I will go before nutrition. But either way, it would be at least a few months. Writing a book takes a ton of time, and I just have so many other projects as well. I have clients, I have Quora, Medium, YouTube, etc., and all of these take quite a bit of time. I'm already working 80 hours per week, I would say minimum, and so it's just tough to actually find the time to embark on something that is a very, very big project. What is the alternative to bodyweight dips if your collarbone hurts during it? So yeah, dips are sort of a unique exercise. They're like an extreme decline press. So you have like overhead press, you have incline, you have bench press, you have decline press, And then you have dips, which are even more declined. It's so declined, you're essentially pushing through your own body, sort of. So this means that it places unique stresses on the collarbone, on the sternum, sometimes on the shoulders as well. So I would say the best alternative is going to be a decline press. Maybe try a Smith machine. It's not for everyone, but I would say for most people, the decline press is going to replicate the dip as closely as possible. But keep in mind, neither of which are necessary. You can definitely build a great chest and a great set of triceps without decline and without dips as well. Are there any long-term side effects of running? Any better alternatives I jog on my off days? Yeah, the side effects are you're going to get in better shape and you are going to have more endurance and you're going to have more shapely, sexy legs. But it can impact muscle growth, as I talked about before. And I would say if you are struggling in the gym and jogging on your off days, that would be the first place to cut. Switch it for exercise bike or elliptical or rowing or basically fucking anything else apart from running, as it can have a lot of interference with lifting weights. So it really depends on your goals and how you want to set things up. I do write plans for people that combine running and lifting, but it is sort of tricky sometimes, especially if they want to do a higher frequency of both. So it really depends. You can message me for a custom plan if you want, and we can collaborate on getting you the perfect plan. But without any other information, it's sort of hard to actually give any kind of meaningful advice. All right, next question. We're on the last page, almost there. I feel like I've just ran a marathon. How to train around pain, as well as your thoughts on conjugate style of training. So pain is something that is very, very interesting. Pain usually means a problem, but not always. Sometimes training through pain is okay. Generally, though, I think, you should listen to your body, and pain is generally a sign that there is tissue damage. Not always. You can have tissue damage with no pain. You can have pain with no tissue damage. But there is undoubtedly some kind of correlation there, and I think generally speaking, if you have pain, you need to listen the fuck up. I did a video on how to train around injuries. I will link it up there in a card as well. My thoughts on conjugate, I went into this a little bit before. I think it's not bad in some cases, but for raw lifters, most of them don't follow it anymore. If you look at most of the strongest people in the world for raw lifting, most of them don't train conjugate. Conjugate is where you are constantly varying all of the different exercises in order to get a new stimulus. And honestly, I don't think it's needed for most people. And I think for a lot of people, it's not going to be optimal. And honestly, I don't use it in my training most of the time. Can you compare RDLs and back extensions in terms of muscles used? So the RDL uses the hamstrings, the glutes, lower back. The back extension uses the hamstring, glutes, and lower back. So they're the same. However, RDLs will also use the lats to keep the bar close, the teres major for the same purpose, rear delts, same purpose, even the long head of the tricep to keep the bar close as well. It'll use the grip, it'll use the traps, it'll use a little bit more hamstring, I find, compared to the back extension. And the back extension will be a little bit more glutes because you have a stronger contraction at the top. At the top of the RDL, you have basically no resistance, because you're just at the top and you're standing there straight up. Whereas with a back extension, because you are inclined forward, you have more resistance at the top. Especially if it's a 90-degree back extension, there is a ton of resistance at the top, and so I think it's a better glute movement. But I would say there is a lot of overlap, and they are not necessarily 100% interchangeable, but I often swap them out in people's programs because they are very similar. My goal is general health and fitness. How much do I need to bother with accessory movements? This just depends on your personal preference. You can just do squat, bench, deadlift and have a perfectly healthy lifestyle, an attractive body, etc. Excuse me. Or you can focus only on accessory movements. The term accessory movement doesn't just mean things that are not squat, bench, deadlift. It means things that are helping you get to your goals, but aren't your main goals. So if you want to focus on dips, bench press might be an accessory movement. Mind blown. So I would say you should always focus on your goals, and you should almost always have accessory movements that help you get towards those goals. Shoulder pain when benching, any suggestions? Yeah, learn to arch, or at least get in a better position. You don't have to take that big arch again, just learn how to get in the right position. Learn not to bench like this. Learn not to flare your elbows out. This is going to rape this area. So learn how to tuck, learn how to arch, and maybe switch to dumbbells for a while. Usually it's just too much benching or too much benching incorrectly. That's going to be the problem. So maybe switch to a different variation for a little while. Bringing your hands in a little bit can help as well. Close grip is going to be more stress on the triceps elbow area compared to the shoulder area. So add a little bit of variation into your program and maybe avoid benching for a little while. And when you come back to benching, lighten the weight and do the movement more better. Does mobility or flexibility work help in doing anything besides just being more flexible? Maybe. If you are sort of restricting your range of motion and you're getting that range of motion somewhere else. For example, if you don't have adequate hip mobility and you are getting butt wink in the bottom position of a squat, yeah, mobility work I think can help. Or if you are bench pressing and you don't have adequate shoulder mobility, and so you're getting this kind of situation and you're wobbling on the way down, that can easily stress your rotator cuff. So it really depends on the individual. Some people never need any mobility work. It comes naturally. They don't need to do anything specific. Other people, they're just a little bit tighter and they need more work to either hit depth or to get full range of motion, etc. It really just depends on the individual. Usually women are more naturally flexible. Men are a little bit more tight. Keep in mind that tightness isn't always bad, okay? A certain amount of muscular tension can actually make lifting easier and actually allow you to lift more weight. If your hips are tight, this might actually help your squat because it limits depth and you can use that tension as almost like a squat suit. Same thing for chest. If your pecs are tight, that can help you to bench more weight. Same thing for your triceps, same thing for most of the muscles involved. So you want to have adequate mobility, but you don't want to have excessive mobility. It's been shown that excessive mobility is going to be just as bad as a lack of mobility for injury prevention. So there you go. Thoughts about neck training. I think it's good. Sometimes I do that looks dirty, but I put a dumbbell here and then I use that as resistance. Obviously I'm lying down, not sitting down. And I think this has helped my neck gains a little bit, but I haven't done it really consistently or long term, so it's sort of hard to say. I think if you want a bigger neck training is going to be absolutely vital, but if you don't want a big neck, it's not really 100% necessary, obviously. If you're doing like lateral raises or curls or squats or deadlifts, anything that puts tension through the whole body, you're probably going to have to tense your neck and it will grow to a certain extent. You'll never see anyone really fucking strong with a small neck, even if they've never ever trained their neck directly, just because it does grow along with the whole body because it just experiences tension because the whole body is experiencing tension during these compound movements. But if you want to maximize growth, I think specific flexion, extension, side-to-side work can also help. Deficit for cutting through calorie control or cardio. It depends on where you are. If you are very fat or high body fat percentage, whatever PC way you want to say it, if you have a lot of body fat to lose, let's put it that way, and you are eating like crap, just clean up your diet and that is completely fine. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to, do cardio even. If you're heavier, it's going to be tough to do some forms of cardio. I have some clients and they are like over 140 kilos and they're like, are you going to make me run? Fuck no, I'm going to make you run. That's like it's the worst thing you can do, okay? That's a surefire way to injury. If you are very heavy, I would say over 100 kilos, and it's going to be tough to run, and you're probably going to get injured if you try to run too much or too soon or too fast or too long or too whatever. So I would not do running. However, if you get leaner, let's say you're 10% and your calories are already pretty low and you want to lose weight, you want to keep losing weight, that's where I think doing some cardio can help. That's where your food is so low that you don't want it to go lower, because that's when you get deficiencies, you get, a lot of hunger, your metabolism slows down, etc. And you're better off adding some low intensity cardio, maybe high intensity cardio, but even just, walking for another hour per day, listen to a podcast or whatever, that's not time wasted. Getting in more steps can help where you don't have to reduce your calories further, and yet you can still keep making progress. So it really just depends on where you are. Generally, the leaner you are and the lower your calories are, the more likely cardio is a good choice. Have you ever tried keto? Why or why not? So I have tried keto a couple years ago, I want to say, and I did it for maybe 6-ish weeks. So I was definitely in ketosis. I wasn't hungry at all. Like the whole day you can go without food and you're just not hungry. It's a sort of weird situation. However, fat loss wasn't that great. I think it can be, but it's not like it's better than other forms of dieting. It's good for appetite reduction, but other than that, I don't really see the appeal. I did notice that it got hard to build muscle. I think if you're natural, keto maybe isn't that great of a choice. You can still build muscle, but I have more of a high volume approach to training most of the time. And so I really found that I missed those carbs. I wasn't hungry. I just felt like hollow. I just felt like hollow inside. I felt kind of flat. I felt like my energy and workouts sort of dissipated a lot more quickly than it used to. And I think if you set up keto correctly, it can work pretty well. But I also think it's overrated. And I think it's not necessarily a cult, but I think a lot of people push it when it's not really necessary or not really going to be optimal for a person. If you have a lot of fat to lose, I think keto can be a good option, but it is definitely restrictive. And if you have any kind of social life, I think it gets to be really difficult, especially here in China where people eat rice every single meal. There are carbs every single meal. I think if you told people like, I don't have any carbs or any starches, people would be like, what the fuck? Like, what do you eat? Only meat? How does that work? Only vegetables? Like they can't comprehend how that could actually work. And I think it can work for some people, but definitely not for everyone. And I think for the most part, it's a little bit overrated. That's it. I feel like I've just ran a marathon or something. If you made it to the end of the video, I applaud your patience. All right, so I'll probably do one of these again, maybe in a month or so. And yeah, 105 questions or so. All right, that is all for this video, and I will see you in the next video. Please like, I think it helps get the video out to more people. Comment, subscribe, notifications, etc. And I will see you in that next video. Peace! So if you have any questions, do not drop them down below because I won't check. I will check next time I summon up the willpower to do anything as crazy as this again. Thank you all so much for the support, especially my long-term clients who allow me to do what I do. If you're interested, drop me a line, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace!